Hello, pilots! Before we start the show, we just wanted to let you know that next week on Friday the 25th, we're going to be playing Pilot Wings 64. It's a game that's very dear to us, has been with us for a large part of our lives. We're going to be talking about why we love this game so much, how it's been such a big inspiration for Volo Airsport, and we're just going to have a great time playing it with you guys. So, show up next week, Friday the 25th, 6 p.m. GMT, 1 p.m. EST. See you then.
Hello everyone, I am Oliver Nelson Jr., the developer of the interactive fiction adventures All Hail the Spider God, Screw You Bear Dad, and Mazurka, A Ghost in Italy. Today I'm very happy to be joined by my colleagues, the lead developers of Volo Airsport. Martin?
Yeah, that's me, lead developer of Volo Airsport. Love programming, love making things fly.
And Frank.
Hi, I'm Frank, and I love programming too, actually.
And one really interesting thing to note is that a lot of players don't realize that developers are players as well. We too browse the Steam store for sales and deals and just for cool stuff. And while we were browsing Steam, talking about the things we saw, Frank actually mentioned something really interesting that I hadn't really thought about before in terms of how games are developed. So, can you take that away, Frank?
Yeah, sure. So I want to talk about growing games. Let's bust a myth. Games are not products until they are burnt to disk, packaged and displayed on a shelf, whether it's digitally or actually. What I'm talking about is what we did years ago, the stuff that was in the actual physical stores. So as gamers, we're always assuming that we're buying products, while much more often instead we're buying into a creative process that is sold as a product. So let's call this creative process growing a game. It's an organic process where developers are continually reshaping what the game is and should be. So with Volo we try to be as open as possible about the growth of it. And this is in contrast with the AAA studios where they actually grow their game in the dark several years before letting you know what it looks like or letting you know what it ends up being. So since its growth is hidden, you kind of get the idea that this AAA studio was always working on the finished product, while instead they might have started with some completely different idea and worked from that to get to the finished product. So I think the friction that arises from this model is that growth can yield wildly varying products that you may or may not have envisioned when buying into it, and you pay a product price for something that no one knows what it will become. It can mean that developers get paid very little for a lot of work. So if you look at early access this way, you see that we sort of halfway embrace this concept of growth. We want to play games as early as possible. We want to support the developers we want to support the developers by paying for it. But you still buy into a non-existing product, which is weird. So some game developers just grow their game in the dark, almost finish it, and then release it as early access on Steam to avoid this weird situation. And I think it's a very sensible thing to do, but it's not something that we want to do. So they realize they're selling a product, so they make sure it's ready and then use early access as a glorified beta phase to iron out bugs and balance gameplay.
So the fact that Volo Airsport was released when it was, and particularly the fact that it has grown and changed drastically over time, that's sort of directly related to how it's an organic growing product. You guys brought it in really in the alpha phase, and from there you've continued to make it better, of course, but also the way that it has gotten there is, as you said, not grown in the dark. It's happened in front of your audience has happened in front of our players.
Yeah.
To a degree where they can see all the messy bits and the really quite impressive ones as well.
Yeah, they can literally see anything. They can see the actual absolute first version of Volo that Martijn made 6 years ago. It's still on YouTube.
Oh yeah, we're going to be looking at that in a bit. The good old days.
Yeah, so that really shows how the game has grown and how it changed.
So you could definitely say there's a difference in one early access title and how that's developed versus another one, and where there's different degrees of openness and different degrees of seeing unfinished work and different degrees of influence.
Can vary drastically.
Yeah, which is why it's strange that early access usually gets lumped under one phrase. Just, you have either not an early access game, it's a regular game that you buy in the shop when it's done, or you have an early access game that you can buy a little bit earlier, and
yeah,
that's sort of it, even though there's a whole universe of different approaches.
Exactly.
And well, with Volo Airsport, I always like to say we don't really know what we're doing, might as well just figure it out together.
Yeah. So
and
what
I think,
makes... Oh, you were saying, Frank?
Well, I think nobody knows what he or she is doing. It's, if you start something, you really don't know what it's going to end up like. And sometimes it just feels that way because we only see the finished product. But it's never the case.
That's a very good point to make, I think. Yeah.
So the growth of Volo Airsport, really, the significantly more polished version of Volo Airsport, especially coming from the first version that we're sort of seeing now, that was directly made possible by the support of your users then, correct?
You could definitely say that.
Yeah. Our players thought it was a really cool thing, so they supported us by buying it, and that made it possible to develop it further. Without their money, we couldn't have done anything.
And you said that a lot of this growth is hidden, and that you've sort of opened that directly to players to comment upon and really see all the messy bits, from the stuff that makes it to the stuff that gets changed over time to make it better.
Yeah.
What is an example of some hidden growth that's happened for Volo Airsport?
Some hidden growth? That's an interesting one. I suppose hidden is a relative term as well, because these videos that we're going through now, they are on YouTube, and so if you wanted to, you could see from pretty much day one what does the game look like now, and some people have, and even though the game looked ridiculous and super abstract and in no way like what it looks like right now, other than the blue guy, it's, you can kind of see the resemblance, so not completely hidden, but what has changed is that I started out not really knowing, hey, can I do this thing with the ragdoll? You know, the ragdoll with all the limbs and all the aerodynamics working on it, and when you use the controller, you move the limbs around instead of just using pre-made animation. That's a relatively new idea, especially at the time. That was not something that people weren't doing, and I had very little, let's just say no game development experience, so I didn't know whether that was possible or not. I just had to go try it, figure it out, and see if it worked. And then I tried it, and it's not like it immediately worked from the get-go as well. It's not like the first idea I had there was gold. I made so many versions of the game that were just unplayable, just because the physics simulation was kind of there, but mostly not. That whole process is something that people tend to gloss over a little bit.
Yeah.
It was not at all obvious that whole approach was ever going to work. And now it kind of seems obvious because there's a game on Steam that just says, hey, you can do physically based active ragdolls with aerodynamics on them and you can make them fly.
Exactly.
Obvious, right? Well, no, it wasn't at the time. And for many things, like the parachutes, same story. You just have to go try it, and then first you figure out 20 different versions of parachutes, physics-based parachutes, that don't work. And it can be really demotivating, because you have this picture in your mind of, I know theoretically this is possible, but am I ever gonna find a way to do it with modern day game technology? And then the answer is complicated. Luckily, it turns out that eventually, yes, we do find ways to make these things fly, but it's not a given.
So, really, the parachute update, or the parachute experimental release available on itch.io right now, that's a prime example of something that is super experimental, and really it looks like, this is the base version, but it was only made possible by a ton of iteration and unplayable builds and really hard work going on behind the scenes to even make the base vision of that fantasy a reality.
Yeah, it's just a lot of rolling around in the dirt. If you want to compare it to just a visual metaphor, that is a lot like how I feel every day when I work with my own code and when I work with game engines. It's not pretty. It's not pretty. It's hard work, and most of the time you just figure out, well, this is not the right way to do it.
Yeah. So it would be interesting that if in the future we document growth in such a way that you can see everything.
Yes,
that would be an ideal for me. If as an audience you want to see how games are made, you should make almost a very fine-grained documentary about the game that's being grown, and you should see all the failures and all the successes. And of course that's a lot to watch, so you have to pick specific points in time that best illustrate it, but still it's an interesting idea. I think.
Actually, I just hit upon why I feel that showing all of this stuff is so important. Because actually, let me pull up a video of I think one that you already saw, Nelson. It was the 0.01 alpha build.
Okay.
Let me quickly pull that up here, because I think that was a very interesting point to make about this. Yeah, it's this one. Let me shut myself up because I talk in this video. So you saw this, and immediately you said, "There's this ring cloud. It looks great. Look at what that does when the camera and the character just go through it. It's just visually, it's such a spectacle. You get all this parallax motion, and suddenly you get all this depth and speed perception, and suddenly just the play with the framing and space. There's so much tension going on all of a sudden just because there's a cloud there." And that shows that in the old version we had clouds, and in the new version we don't really do clouds, and we're missing something because of that. The clouds really added something, and that's just something we don't have right now. So what happened? Well, it turns out clouds are very difficult to render, and just even the few clouds we had in this build were quite expensive. So you don't want to use a lot of them. But at the same time, the Volo world has grown larger than what is available in this particular level. And imagine dotting all of that with clouds. Looks nice, right, as a picture in your mind, but on a technical level, that is really difficult. That is a rendering problem that many AAA studios right now are anxiously trying to solve, and I'm trying to dive into the mathematics and the technical aspects to make cloud rendering on large scales work.
So on one hand, you could say that something was lost, but on the other hand, basically, the change didn't happen because, lazy devs, you didn't figure out how to time travel and make my GPU better. What happened was you iterated, and you basically just kept finding solutions to make the game you wanted to make the best that you could make it for your players, and that was all made really possible by the player support, both monetarily and just community-wise through the feedback that they've been giving you through the years.
And with respect to the clouds, like we had to ditch them in order to make the game work on just a level that we could sell it. So that it could run on a lot of systems, and doing these clouds would be a bother for us. But having the video and having shown people this stuff and having a lot of people around who've played this build and remember the clouds means that we don't lose sight of the fact that we still really want to do clouds. Whereas if we had no recordings of there ever having been any clouds in any of the development versions and nobody knew, like what would the chances be that we actually go, hey, yeah, we really need to get back to cloud rendering because that's really important? I think those chances would be lower. But with this stuff around, it helps us keep on track. It helps us keep track of what matters.
So Volo Airsport, the parachute update, and just the main game in general, it has grown organically over time due to the support of your players. And really, when you look at this, the main point you come across is that, it's happening because it's really collaboration. It's all happening because we're all working together to make this fantasy of flight possible.
Yeah, a really good example of this to me is all the players that are so excited about this game that they take the time to comment on each new version and all the changes and say what they do and don't like. That really helps define the path for growth.
Yeah, and it's how you'd want early access to go, but it's not guaranteed that it would go that way. I'm just happy that we have a small but very dedicated community who just loves this stuff as much as we do. It's wonderful.
So in a way, it's growing, but it's a managed growth. You're always keeping in sight the goal, and that happens not only internally every day, but with the support and help of your players.
Oh yeah, it's being able to every day get up and quickly remember who you are and what the whole point is of the thing that you're trying to make.
Who am
as you go through. No, it's that. We work on this game every day, basically, and it's this game, to say it's a huge part of our lives is a bit of an understatement, at least as far as my personal life goes. This game is my life right now. I care deeply about it. And just having lots of other people around who care about this game means I get to remember who I am every morning and figure out, again, what is important, such that when I get in front of my computer and I boot up the code editor and I start working on whatever of the 10,000 things I could be working on, I pick one or two things out of that gigantic list that actually matter because I know, because people told me. If I don't have that, it's so easy to lose myself in technical details that just take up a week or a month or a year of my time, and ultimately it doesn't really matter all that much. It's so easy to make that mistake.
Yeah, so on the one hand you have the motivation from the players to make it into something that people want to play. On the other hand you have your internal motivation to make it in something that you really want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And those combined are really powerful, because if you only have this internal motivation, then you can get lost in details, and something will probably never get finished because you don't have an audience. and I think this is, if you look at other studios that have a budget for things, they say, let's say you have $300,000 to make a game, then that's also part of the motivation to make something that's doable within that budget.
Oh yeah. We're not perfect at this process either. Lately we've been reflecting a lot on how we've been prioritizing certain feature development and how much time to spend on technical work in the background. And we definitely had this tendency to focus on really long-term technical work, like building the foundations for multiplayer, and just essentially being quiet for half a year.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have anything concrete to release, because multiplayer work is super difficult to do, and a lot of work needs to just be done and even get the basics going. But that means you kind of lose touch with all of you guys, all of the players, and you're gonna have to be wondering, like, what is even happening with the game, even though we're working on it every day. And that shows a kind of mismatch between your own priorities and the priorities of the rest of the world that interacts with your game. You can have a little bit of a difference there, but they need to overlap enough such that you can still be happy with how everything's going. And we're certainly focusing a lot more directly on that now, and this is where the switch to parachute development came in as well. We just realized, hey, we already have this parachute prototype lying around, and people are really enthusiastic about what we've already shown about it. It's kind of ready to go. Why not just put it out there and focus on that for a little bit, and just share it with the world instead of just keeping it for ourselves and not letting it do any useful work. Mm-hmm. And we've been doing that for a little bit now, and the response to it has been amazing. Yeah. I feel warm inside genuinely talking about it. That has been such a fun and rewarding experience. I think that's the better way to do early access than we've been doing it before. So yeah, there too, it's an iterative approach. We didn't really know how to do early access when we started, but we're figuring it out as we go, just as the rest of the development of the game.
And you pilots directly make it possible.
Yes.
Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw today, you can get Volo Airsport now on Steam, and the itch.io experimental release is currently available on itch.io. It's the parachute update, so you can grab that for free, experience it, and let us know your feedback. As we said, you make this possible, and thank you so much for doing so.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Until next time, pilots.
Take care.